A widowed father paid just $1,200 for a crumbling estate at a county auction. What he found buried beneath the frozen ground would be worth $285 million and change his broken life forever. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The morning frost clung to the windows of the small apartment like frozen tears, refusing to let go even as the sun crept over the Pennsylvania hills. Nathan Mercer sat at the edge of his bed, still wearing yesterday's flannel shirt, staring at the photo on his nightstand. Grace smiled back at him from behind the glass, her dark hair catching summer light, her eyes holding that spark he'd fallen in love with 17 years ago. 2 years. 2 years since cancer stole her from him, from their children, from the life they'd built together brick by careful brick. Some mornings, like this one, it still felt like yesterday. He could hear Lily moving around in the kitchen, the soft clatter of cereal bowls, the hiss of the old coffee maker he kept meaning to replace. She was only 11, but she moved through the apartment like a woman 3 times her age, carrying responsibilities no child should have to bear. Since Grace passed, Lily had become the glue holding their small family together. She packed lunches, reminded her brother about homework, and never once complained. It broke Nathan's heart in ways he couldn't speak. He pushed himself up, bones aching from another night on a mattress too thin and a heart too heavy. Through the paper-thin walls, he heard Marcus, his 8-year-old son, shuffling toward the bathroom. The boy barely spoke anymore. Used to be, Marcus would talk your ear off about dinosaurs, space shuttles, anything his imagination could grab hold of. Now he moved through days like a ghost, eyes distant, voice small when it came at all. Nathan splashed cold water on his face and stared at the man in the mirror. 38 years old, but looking 50. Grey threading through his brown hair. Lines carved deep around eyes that had forgotten how to rest. Calluses on his hands from years of honest work, general contracting, handyman jobs, anything that paid. Grace used to say those hands could build a castle if he put his mind to it. Now they could barely keep the lights on. He stepped into the kitchen where Lily had already set out 3 bowls, 3 spoons, a box of store-brand cereal. She looked up and smiled, that brave, practiced smile that made him want to weep and cheer at the same time. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, sweetheart." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," she said simply, "but I wanted to." Marcus appeared in the doorway, pajamas wrinkled, hair sticking up in 7 directions. He slid into his chair without a word, picked up his spoon, and began eating. Nathan watched him for a moment, searching for some spark, some sign of the boy who used to build Lego rockets on the living room floor and narrate their missions to distant planets. "Hey, buddy," Nathan tried. "How'd you sleep?" Marcus shrugged, one shoulder, didn't look up. Lily shot her father a look that said, "Don't push, not yet." Nathan nodded slightly and poured himself coffee that tasted like regret. The rent was due in 9 days. The heating bill sat unopened on the counter, a white envelope full of numbers he couldn't face. Christmas was 3 weeks away, and Nathan had exactly $47 in his checking account after last night's grocery run. He'd been picking up odd jobs where he could, fixing porches, patching roofs, rewiring old lamps for the antique shop on Main Street. But work slowed down in winter. People held tight to their money when the cold came, same as him. After the kids left for school, Lily walking Marcus to the bus stop like she did every morning, Nathan sat alone in the quiet apartment. The silence pressed against him, thick and suffocating. He thought about Grace, about the plans they'd made, the house they were going to buy someday, white shutters, wrap-around porch, a yard big enough for a dog and a garden. She'd wanted roses, pink ones, climbing up a trellis by the kitchen window. He never bought her those roses, never built that trellis. Now he couldn't even afford a tree for Christmas. His phone buzzed, a text from his buddy Carl, another contractor who threw work his way when he could. "Hey man, heard about a county auction tomorrow. Old properties, back taxes, might be something worth flipping. Thompson County Fairgrounds starts at 10, could be worth a look." Nathan stared at the message. Auctions weren't really his thing. He didn't have capital to invest, didn't have time for projects that might not pan out. But something about the message stuck with him, like a splinter under the skin. He typed back a thumbs up and set the phone down. That night, after dinner, after homework, after Marcus retreated to his room and Lily fell asleep on the couch watching some cooking show, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop. He searched Thompson County property auction and scrolled through the listings. Most were vacant lots, condemned structures, properties with liens longer than his arm. Then he saw it, Lot 17, Evergreen Manor, a Victorian estate on the eastern edge of town, sitting on 12 acres of wooded land. The photo showed a massive structure, 3 stories of weathered brick and ivy-covered walls, a wraparound porch sagging under decades of neglect, windows dark like closed eyes. The description was sparse. Historic property, requires significant renovation, sold as is, opening bid $500. $500. Nathan leaned closer to the screen, something tightening in his chest. He'd heard of Evergreen Manor. Everyone in town had. Back in the early 1900s, it had been the crown jewel of Thompson County, owned by some railroad tycoon whose name nobody remembered anymore. The story went that the family threw legendary Christmas parties, the kind that drew guests from 3 states over. But something happened, something people whispered about but never quite explained. The family vanished. The estate fell silent, and for over 40 years it had stood empty, rotting, waiting. Locals said it was cursed, said strange lights flickered in the windows on winter nights, said anyone who tried to buy it met bad luck. Nathan didn't believe in curses. He believed in leaky pipes and faulty wiring. He believed in structural damage and back taxes. But something about that photo, that grand old house frozen in time, called to him in a voice he couldn't ignore. He thought about Grace, about the home she'd dreamed of, about Lily playing mother at 11 and Marcus losing himself in silence at 8. He thought about Christmas coming with nothing under a tree they didn't have. And before he could talk himself out of it, he wrote down the auction details and circled the date. The Thompson County Fairgrounds smelled like hay, motor oil, and cheap coffee. Nathan arrived early, parking his rusted pickup between a BMW that didn't belong and a farm truck that did. The auction hall was a converted barn, metal chairs arranged in crooked rows, a podium at the front where a heavy-set man in a bolo tie shuffled papers. Maybe 30 people had shown up, a mix of investors in pressed shirts and locals in work boots. Nathan found a seat near the back and waited. His stomach churned. He had $800 in his pocket, cash he'd scraped together from 3 weeks of odd jobs. $800 that should probably go toward rent, toward the heating bill, toward something practical. But something kept him planted in that metal chair. The auction moved fast. Lot after lot went by. Vacant land snatched up by developers, condemned houses ignored by everyone. When Lot 17 came up, the auctioneer cleared his throat. Evergreen Manor, 12 acres, historic Victorian estate, significant renovation required, property sold as is with all contents, opening bid $500. Silence. Nathan looked around. No one moved, no paddles raised. The investors stared at their phones. The locals avoided eye contact, like the listing carried disease. $500, the auctioneer repeated. Anyone? More silence. Nathan's heart hammered, his hand twitched. Going once at 500, still nothing. Going twice. Nathan's arm shot up before his brain could stop it. The auctioneer blinked, surprised. We have 500, do I hear 6? Nothing. The room stayed frozen. 500 going once, going twice. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $500. Heads turned. Eyes measured him. Someone near the front muttered something Nathan couldn't hear, but the tone was clear enough. Pity, skepticism, maybe a little fear. Nathan walked to the front, filled out the paperwork, handed over $500 bills from his envelope. The clerk, a tired woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, slid a thick folder across the counter. Property deed, tax history, survey maps. Keys should be inside. She paused, looking at him over her glasses. You know the stories about that place, right? Nathan nodded. I've heard. She held his gaze for a moment, then shrugged. Good luck, honey. You're gonna need it. He drove out to Evergreen Manor that same afternoon, the folder riding shotgun, his mind racing faster than the engine. The road wound through bare winter trees, their branches reaching toward a grey sky like skeletal fingers. Frost clung to everything, turning the world into a monochrome photograph. When the manor came into view, Nathan pulled the truck to the side of the road and just stared. The photo hadn't done it justice. The estate was enormous, rising 3 stories of red brick now faded to a dusty rose. Ivy crawled up the eastern wall, brown and brittle in the cold. The wraparound porch sagged in the middle, its railings broken like missing teeth. Twin chimneys rose from the roof, one cracked down the center. Every window was dark, coated with decades of grime, reflecting nothing. But beneath the decay, Nathan saw bones, good bones, the kind of structure that survived when lesser buildings crumbled. Whoever built this place had built it to last. He pulled up the gravel drive, weeds pushing through the stones, and parked in front of the main entrance. The silence was immediate, absolute. No birds, no wind, just the soft tick of his cooling engine and the thud of his own heartbeat. He found the key in the folder, an old skeleton key, black iron worn smooth from use. The front door was massive, oak planks reinforced with iron bands, a tarnished brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Nathan fitted the key into the lock, turned it, and felt something click deep within the mechanism. The door swung inward with a groan that echoed through the empty halls. Nathan stepped inside and stopped breathing. The foyer stretched before him, a grand entrance hall with a marble floor now coated in dust. A sweeping staircase rose to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate patterns of leaves and vines. A massive chandelier hung overhead, crystal pendants catching what little light seeped through the grimy windows. To his left, a parlor. To his right, what looked like a library. Ahead, the hall continued into shadow. The air smelled of dust, old wood, and something else, something faintly sweet, like dried flowers or forgotten perfume. Everything was still. Everything was waiting. Nathan walked slowly, his boots leaving prints in the dust. He ran his fingers along the banister, felt the quality of the woodwork. Whoever lived here had spared no expense. Crown moldings lined the ceilings. Detailed tilework framed the fireplace in the parlor. Even under layers of grime, he could see beauty. But it was the stillness that got to him, the sense that this place hadn't just been abandoned, but sealed, preserved, like a tomb. He explored for hours, room by room, floor by floor, bedrooms with furniture draped in white sheets, a kitchen with cast-iron fixtures and a wood-burning stove, a ballroom on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a parquet floor that creaked beneath his weight. Everywhere he looked, remnants of another era. China in cabinets, books on shelves, paintings on walls, their subjects barely visible beneath decades of dust. And in a small study on the third floor he found the journals. They sat on a roll-top desk, leather-bound volumes stacked neatly, as if someone had placed them there just yesterday. Nathan opened the first one carefully, the spine cracking softly. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping cursive in faded black ink. December 4th, 1897. The manor is complete at last. Eleanor says it is too grand, too ambitious for a family of 4. But I have built it for the future, for the children we will have, for the Christmases we will celebrate within these walls. May Evergreen Manor stand for generations. May it know only love. The name at the bottom, Theodore Ashford. Nathan flipped through the pages, scanning entries that spanned years. Theodore wrote about business dealings, railroad expansions, investments, about his wife Eleanor and their 2 children, a son named William and a daughter named Rose. About the Christmas parties that became legendary, guests arriving from Philadelphia, New York, even Washington. About joy and prosperity and a life that seemed blessed by Providence itself. Then the tone changed. October 12, 1918. The influenza has taken hold. William fell ill 3 days ago. Eleanor and Rose show symptoms now. The doctors say there is nothing to be done. I have built an empire of steel and stone, yet I cannot save my own family. What cruel joke is this? What vengeful God demands such payment? Nathan's throat tightened. He turned the page. October 21st, 1918. They are gone. All of them. Eleanor, William, Rose. I buried them this morning beneath the oak tree on the eastern hill. The minister spoke of heaven, of reunion, of peace. I heard none of it. There is no peace. There is only silence where their voices used to be. More pages, more entries, each one darker than the last. Theodore wrote of withdrawing from society, of dismissing the staff, of sealing himself within the manor like a man entombing himself alive. December 24th, 1920. Christmas Eve. I have not celebrated in 2 years. The decorations remain in the attic where they belong. The ballroom stands empty. The halls echo with ghosts. I have spent my fortune on monuments to grief, on gardens that no one tends, on rooms that no one enters. What was the point of any of it? What is the point of anything without love? Nathan reached the final entry, the handwriting shakier now, the ink faded almost to brown. March 3rd, 1921. I have made my decision. The fortune means nothing, the manor means nothing. But perhaps someday someone will find what I have hidden, someone who understands loss, someone who knows that money cannot heal a broken heart, but purpose can give one reason to beat again. I have written instructions. I have left a path. May whoever follows it use what they find not for themselves but for others. That is the only redemption left to me. That is the only way my family's memory survives. The true gift of Christmas lies beneath the heart of this home. Remember that. Remember us. Nathan closed the journal with trembling hands. His eyes stung. His chest ached. He had come here looking for a project, maybe a property to flip, maybe just an escape from the walls of that tiny apartment. Instead, he had found a mirror. A man who lost everything. A man who sealed himself away from the world. A man who died alone with nothing but regret and a cryptic message about something hidden. The true gift of Christmas lies beneath the heart of this home. Nathan looked around the study. What did that mean? Beneath the heart? The heart of the home. In old houses like this, the heart usually meant the hearth, the fireplace, the gathering place. He stood, journal still clutched in his hand, and made his way downstairs to the main parlor. The fireplace there was massive, carved marble surrounding a firebox large enough to roast a pig. He ran his hands over the stonework, searching for seams, for hidden catches, for anything unusual. Nothing. He checked the fireplace in the library. Same result. The one in the master bedroom. Nothing. Frustration gnawed at him. Maybe it was just poetry. Maybe Theodore had lost his mind in grief and written nonsense to comfort himself in his final days. Maybe there was nothing hidden here except dust and decay and sad old stories. Nathan returned to the foyer as the last light faded from the windows. He stood at the base of the grand staircase, exhausted, confused, ready to call it a day. Then he noticed the grandfather clock. It stood against the wall near the parlor entrance, a towering piece of dark mahogany with a brass face and pendulum frozen mid-swing. He hadn't paid it much attention before, just another antique among dozens. But now, in the growing shadows, something about it caught his eye. The clock face showed 12 o'clock, midnight, or noon. Both and neither. And carved into the base, barely visible beneath layers of grime, was a small symbol, a heart. Nathan's pulse quickened. He approached the clock, knelt before it, wiped the dust away with his sleeve. The heart was intricate, detailed, wrapped in what looked like ivy or vines, and at its center, a small circular indentation, a keyhole. He fumbled in his pocket for the skeleton key he'd used to open the front door. It was too large. Wrong shape. But wait, in the folder from the auction, hadn't there been more than one key? He rushed outside to his truck, grabbed the folder, dumped its contents on the hood. Papers scattered in the winter wind. And there, glinting in the fading light, was a second key. Smaller, older, more ornate. Nathan's hands shook as he carried it back inside. He knelt before the grandfather clock, fitted the key into the heart-shaped indentation, and turned. A deep mechanical click echoed through the manor. Then another. Then a sound like stone grinding against stone somewhere below his feet. The front panel of the clock swung outward like a door. Behind it, cut into the wall, was a narrow opening, and beyond that opening, stone steps descending into darkness. Nathan stood at the threshold, heart pounding, breath shallow. The cold air rising from below carried a different quality, older, heavier, like it had been sealed away for a century. He pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight, and pointed it into the void. The steps continued down, curving slightly, disappearing into shadow. The true gift of Christmas lies beneath the heart of this home. Nathan thought about his children, about Lily making breakfast every morning because she couldn't stand to see her father struggle, about Marcus retreating further into silence with each passing day, about Grace's dream of a house with pink roses and room for laughter, about $1,200 and a crumbling estate that everyone else had been too afraid to touch. He took a deep breath, gripped the doorframe, and began his descent. The stone was cold beneath his boots. The air grew warmer as he went deeper, which made no sense. Heat should have been rising, but nothing about this place followed ordinary rules. The staircase curved once, twice, then opened into a chamber far larger than he expected. Nathan swept his flashlight across the space and felt the world tilt beneath him. Walls of reinforced brick stretched into shadow. Steel shelving lined the perimeter, loaded with wooden crates and metal lockboxes. Display cases stood like sentinels, their glass surfaces clouded but intact. And in the center of the chamber, illuminated by his trembling beam of light, sat a massive safe, its door closed, its surface gleaming like it had been polished yesterday. Nathan took one step forward, then another. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. He reached the nearest crate, lifted the lid with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Gold, bars of it, stacked like bricks, each one stamped with a date. 1894, 1897, 1902. He moved to the next crate. Coins, hundreds of them. Liberty Head double eagles, Morgan silver dollars, St. Gordon's designs he'd only seen in magazines. The display cases held jewelry, diamond necklaces that caught his flashlight and scattered rainbows across the ceiling. Ruby brooches the size of his thumb. Emerald rings set in platinum. Pearl strands coiled like sleeping snakes. Against the far wall, wrapped in cloth and protective covering, were paintings. He recognized one, recognized the style at least. It looked like a Monet. Another might have been a Renoir. Beside them, sculptures in marble and bronze, books bound in leather with gold leaf titles. Nathan's legs gave out. He sank to the cold stone floor, flashlight slipping from his fingers, darkness pressing in at the edges of his vision. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen. Not to people like him. Not to handymen with empty bank accounts and broken families and nothing but grit and prayer keeping them upright. But the gold was solid beneath his palm when he reached for it. The weight was real. The cold metal, the rough edges, the undeniable presence of fortune beyond anything he'd ever imagined. $285 million. He didn't know the exact number yet, wouldn't know until experts came, until appraisers evaluated, until lawyers verified. But sitting there in the dark beneath a forgotten estate, surrounded by a century of hidden wealth, Nathan Mercer understood one thing with perfect clarity. Theodore Ashford hadn't just built a home, he'd built a legacy. He'd sealed away everything that mattered, not for himself, but for someone who would come after, someone who needed it, someone who would understand. Nathan thought about the journal upstairs, about Theodore's final words. May whoever follows it use what they find not for themselves but for others. That is the only redemption left to me. That is the only way my family's memory survives. The tears came then, hot and silent, streaming down his weathered face. He wept for Theodore, for Eleanor, for William and Rose buried beneath an oak tree on the eastern hill. He wept for Grace, for the roses he never planted, for the home they never built. He wept for Lily making breakfast at 11 years old, and Marcus losing his voice one day at a time. And somewhere in that weeping, somewhere in that flood of grief and shock and impossible hope, a new feeling took root. Purpose. Nathan wiped his face with dirty hands, picked up the flashlight and stood. The vault stretched around him, silent and patient, waiting for whatever came next. He didn't know what that would be. Didn't know how to explain this to his children, to the world, to anyone. Didn't know the first thing about art authentication or gold appraisal or the tax implications of inheriting a railroad tycoon's hidden fortune. But he knew one thing. Theodore Ashford had given him a second chance, had reached across a century of silence and loss and placed something precious in his hands. Nathan wouldn't waste it, couldn't waste it. Not when his children needed him. Not when Grace's dream still lived in his heart. Not when a stranger's final wish depended on him getting this right. He climbed the stairs slowly, emerged through the grandfather clock, and stood in the foyer of Evergreen Manor as the last light of day surrendered to night. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt hopeful, expectant, alive in a way it hadn't been for decades. Nathan pulled out his phone and called the only person he trusted completely. "Hey, Dad." Lily's voice, tired but warm. "Where are you? We made sandwiches for dinner." "I'm coming home, sweetheart." His voice cracked. "But this weekend I want to bring you and your brother somewhere. There's something I need to show you." "What is it?" Nathan looked around the grand foyer, at the chandelier catching moonlight, at the staircase rising toward tomorrow. "I think," he said slowly, "I found what Mom always wanted. I think I found our home." Silence on the line. Then Lily's voice, smaller now, fragile with something like hope. "Really?" Nathan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Really, baby, I promise." He hung up, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and walked to the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting down like whispered blessings, covering the estate in white. Christmas was 3 weeks away, and for the first time in 2 years, Nathan Mercer believed something good might be coming. He just had no idea how much. The weekend arrived with a cold that cut through clothing and settled deep in the bones. Nathan picked up Lily and Marcus from school that Friday afternoon, their backpacks stuffed with homework they wouldn't touch, their faces curious but guarded. They knew something was different. Their father had been quiet all week, distracted, his eyes holding a light they hadn't seen since before their mother got sick. "Where are we going?" Lily asked from the passenger seat, her breath fogging the window as she watched unfamiliar roads scroll past. "Somewhere special," Nathan said. "Somewhere I need to show you." Marcus sat in the back, silent as always, but his eyes tracked the landscape with more interest than usual. The bare trees, the frost-covered fields, the way the world seemed to hold its breath as winter tightened its grip. When Evergreen Manor came into view, both children pressed against the windows. The estate rose from the snow-covered grounds like something from a storybook, its brick walls softened by the white blanket, its windows catching the pale afternoon light. Smoke curled from one of the chimneys where Nathan had managed to get a fire going earlier that morning. "Dad," Lily whispered, "what is this place?" Nathan pulled the truck up the long drive and parked in front of the main entrance. He turned to face his children, searching for the right words. "This," he said slowly, "is Evergreen Manor. I bought it at an auction last week." Lily's eyes went wide. "You bought a mansion?" "It's not exactly a mansion anymore, more like a really big project." He paused, studying their faces. "But there's something inside I need to show you. Something important." Marcus spoke for the first time in days, his voice small and uncertain. "Is it scary?" Nathan's heart clenched. He reached back and squeezed his son's knee. "No, buddy, it's not scary. It's actually kind of amazing." They walked up the front steps together, Nathan leading the way, Lily holding Marcus's hand. The front door swung open with its familiar groan, and the children stepped into the foyer with matching expressions of wonder. "Whoa!" Lily breathed, spinning slowly to take it all in. The chandelier, the staircase, the faded grandeur that clung to every surface. "It's like a museum." Marcus wandered toward the parlor, his small fingers tracing patterns in the dust on a side table. "Who lived here?" "A family," Nathan said. "A long time ago. A man named Theodore Ashford built this place for his wife and children. They used to throw huge Christmas parties here. People came from all over the country." Lily frowned. "What happened to them?" Nathan knelt down so he was eye level with both children. "They got sick. Back in 1918, there was a terrible flu that swept across the world. Theodore's whole family died. His wife Eleanor, his son William, his daughter Rose." Marcus's eyes glistened. "Like Mom?" The question hit Nathan like a physical blow. He swallowed hard, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Different sickness, buddy. But yes, Theodore lost everyone he loved, just like we lost Mom." Lily reached out and took her father's hand. Her grip was fierce, protective. "That's so sad." "It is," Nathan agreed. "But here's the thing. Before Theodore died, he hid something in this house. Something he wanted the right person to find someday. Someone who would understand what it meant to lose everything and still have the courage to keep going." Both children stared at him, waiting. "I found it," Nathan said. "And now I want to show you." He led them through the foyer to the grandfather clock standing sentinel near the parlor entrance. The front panel still hung open from his earlier visit, revealing the narrow passage beyond. Lily peered into the darkness. "There's stairs?" "Going down," Nathan confirmed. "Way down, into a secret room that's been sealed for over 100 years. Marcus pressed closer to his sister. "What's down there?" Nathan pulled out his heavy-duty flashlight and clicked it on. "That's what we're going to find out together. Stay close to me, okay? And watch your step." They descended single file, Nathan leading, Lily in the middle, Marcus bringing up the rear with one hand clutching his sister's jacket. The stone steps were cold and slightly damp, the air growing warmer as they went deeper, carrying that same ancient stillness Nathan remembered from his first descent. "It smells old," Lily whispered. "Over 100 years old," Nathan replied. "No one's been down here since Theodore sealed it up." Why did he seal it? Because he was waiting for the right person to find it. The staircase curved one final time, and then they emerged into the chamber. Nathan swept his flashlight across the space, illuminating the rows of shelving, the display cases, the massive safe in the center. Lily gasped. Marcus made a sound Nathan hadn't heard in months, a soft exclamation of pure amazement. "Dad," Lily said slowly, "what is all this?" Nathan walked to the nearest crate and lifted the lid. The gold bars gleamed in the flashlight beam, their surfaces catching the light and throwing it back in warm yellow waves. "Is that real gold?" Lily's voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "Real gold," Nathan confirmed. "And that's not all." He moved through the chamber, opening crates, gesturing to display cases, pulling back cloth from paintings. The children followed in stunned silence, their eyes growing wider with each new revelation. Coins spilling like pirate treasure. Jewelry that sparkled with gems worth more than most houses. Artwork that belonged in museums. Marcus reached out and touched one of the gold bars, then jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. How much is all this worth? Nathan had spent the week researching, making discreet calls, trying to understand the scope of what he'd found. The numbers still didn't feel real. "The experts will have to verify everything," he said carefully. "But based on what I can tell, we're looking at somewhere around $285 million. Lily made a choking sound. Marcus sat down hard on the stone floor. "Million?" Lily repeated. "With an M?" "With an M." "Dad!" Lily's voice cracked. "That means It means everything changes," Nathan said, "but not in the way you might think." He guided them to the mahogany desk at the back of the chamber, where Theodore's ledger still sat open. Beside it lay another leather-bound book Nathan had discovered on his second visit, a journal different from the ones upstairs. This one was smaller, more personal, and addressed not to posterity, but to whoever might find the vault. "Sit down," Nathan said, pulling up 2 dusty chairs. "There's something you need to hear." He opened the journal and began to read aloud, his voice echoing softly in the underground chamber. "To you who have found this place, my name is Theodore Ashford, and if you are reading these words, then I have been dead for many years, and you have proven yourself worthy of what I leave behind." Lily and Marcus sat motionless, barely breathing. "I built Evergreen Manor in 1897 with dreams of a dynasty. I imagined generations of Ashfords celebrating Christmases within these walls, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the rooms with laughter. My wife Eleanor called me ambitious. My daughter Rose called me silly. My son William called me the best father in the world." Nathan's voice wavered. He cleared his throat and continued. "The influenza took them in the autumn of 1918. William first, then Eleanor, then Rose. I buried them together beneath the oak tree on the eastern hill where we used to have picnics in summer. The minister spoke of God's plan, but I could not hear him over the sound of my own heart breaking." Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Lily reached over and took her brother's hand. "For 2 years after, I lived as a ghost in my own home. I dismissed the servants, locked the gates, stopped answering correspondence. My business partners declared me incompetent. My remaining family declared me mad. Perhaps they were right. Grief does strange things to a man." Nathan turned the page. "But in my isolation, I came to understand something important. The money, the estate, the success I had built, none of it mattered without love, without someone to share it with. I had spent my life accumulating wealth, and in the end, wealth could not save the people who made life worth living. This vault contains everything I amassed in 40 years of enterprise: gold from investments, coins from collections, jewelry that belonged to Eleanor, passed down from her grandmother, pieces I bought her on anniversaries and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays when I simply wanted to see her smile, artwork we collected on our travels to Europe, bearer bonds and stock certificates that have likely grown substantially in value over the decades. I seal it away now not because I no longer need it, though I do not, but because I believe it is waiting for someone who has known loss, someone who understands that fortune means nothing without purpose, someone who will use what I leave behind not for personal gain but for the betterment of others." Nathan looked up at his children. Both were crying openly now, tears streaming down their faces in the dim light of the underground chamber. "If you are that person, then everything here is yours. But with it comes a responsibility. These resources must be used to help those who cannot help themselves, to provide for families in crisis, to give hope to those who have lost it. That is the only way my family's memory survives. That is the only redemption available to me. I have written extensively in my other journals about my life, my family, my regrets. Read them if you wish. understand who we were, and then go forth and do what I could not, find meaning in loss, find purpose in pain, find love even when love seems impossible. The true gift of Christmas was never about presents or parties. It was about being together. It was about hope. It was about believing that tomorrow could be better than today. I lost sight of that when I lost my family. Perhaps you can help me find it again. With hope and faith and endless love, Theodore Ashford, Christmas Day, 1920. Nathan closed the journal and sat in silence with his children. The weight of Theodore's words hung in the air like incense, heavy and sacred. Lily spoke first. He wanted us to find this, someone like us. I think so, Nathan said. Because we lost Mom. Marcus's voice was steadier now, stronger. Because we know what it feels like. Nathan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Lily stood up and walked slowly around the chamber, her eyes moving from treasure to treasure. This could fix everything, Dad. We could pay off all the bills, buy a real house. I wouldn't have to make breakfast anymore. Marcus could have his own room. We could, Nathan agreed. But that's not what you're thinking, is it? Nathan smiled, despite the tears on his face. His daughter was too smart, too perceptive, too much like her mother. No, sweetheart, that's not what I'm thinking. Marcus looked up. What are you thinking? Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter he'd written earlier that week, the one he'd been waiting to share until this moment. I'm thinking about what Theodore said, about using this for others, about giving hope to people who've lost it. He unfolded the paper. I'm thinking about starting a foundation, one that helps families who are going through what we went through. Medical bills, housing, education, all the things that make it so hard to survive when someone you love gets sick or dies. Lily's eyes widened. You want to give it away? Not all of it. We'll keep enough to be comfortable, to have a real home, to never worry about rent or heating bills again. He paused. But the rest? I think Theodore was right. Money doesn't mean anything if you're not using it to help people. Marcus stood up and walked to his father. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around Nathan's waist and held on tight. I think Mum would like that, Marcus whispered. She always wanted to help people. Nathan's composure finally broke. He pulled both children close, the three of them standing in the middle of a fortune that could have bought anything in the world, and all he could think about was Grace. About the plans they'd made. About the life she'd dreamed of. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the house with the pink roses and the wraparound porch. Not the building itself, but what it could become, what it could mean. We're going to do this right, Nathan said, as a family. We're going to honor Theodore's wish and Mom's memory, and we're going to make something good out of all this pain. Lily pulled back, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes bright with something like hope. What do we do first? Nathan took a deep breath. First, we need experts, appraisers, lawyers, people who can verify what's here and help us understand the legal implications. Then we need to decide exactly how to structure the foundation, what causes to support, how to make sure the money goes where it's needed most. That sounds complicated, Marcus said. It is complicated, Nathan admitted, but we'll figure it out together, the same way we've figured out everything else since Mom died. They spent another hour in the vault, exploring, cataloguing, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. Lily found Eleanor's jewelry and held a diamond necklace up to the light, watching rainbows dance across the stone walls. Marcus discovered a collection of antique toys tucked into one corner, wind-up cars and tin soldiers, and a beautiful wooden train set that must have belonged to young William. Can we keep these? Marcus asked, cradling a red fire truck in his small hands. Nathan smiled. I think William would have wanted another kid to play with them. As they prepared to leave, Lily paused at the bottom of the stairs. Dad, what are we going to tell people? The truth, Nathan said. Eventually. But for now, let's keep this between us. There are going to be a lot of questions, a lot of attention. I want to make sure we have our plans in place before the whole world starts weighing in. Lily nodded. Our secret. Our secret, Nathan confirmed, at least for a little while. They climbed the stairs together, emerged through the grandfather clock, and stood in the foyer of Evergreen Manor as the last light of afternoon faded into evening. Snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows like whispered prayers. What happens next will turn this family's life upside down, reveal challenges nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the greatest gifts come with the heaviest responsibilities. Stay tuned to see what unfolds. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. The week that followed was unlike any Nathan had ever experienced. During the day, he continued his normal routine, taking odd jobs, picking up the kids from school, pretending everything was ordinary. But at night, after Lily and Marcus went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents, financial websites, and notes scribbled on napkins. His first call had been to Raymond Baxter, an old friend who'd gone to law school while Nathan learned to swing a hammer. Ray had done well for himself, partner at a mid-sized firm in Harrisburg, the kind of lawyer who handled wills and estates for people with actual wealth. Nathan hadn't spoken to him in years, but when he called and said he needed help with something sensitive, Ray cleared his schedule. They met at a coffee shop halfway between their towns, Ray's Mercedes looking conspicuously out of place next to Nathan's rust bucket pickup. Nathan Mercer, Ray slid into the booth with a grin. Thought you might be dead. What's it been, 15 years? Something like that. Nathan wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. I need your help, Ray, and I need you to keep whatever I tell you completely confidential. Ray's grin faded into professional alertness. You're not in trouble, are you? Opposite of trouble. At least I think so. Nathan took a deep breath. I bought an old estate at auction, found something hidden underneath, something valuable. How valuable? Nathan slid a photograph across the table. He'd taken it with his phone during his second visit to the vault, the image showing a portion of the gold reserves. Ray stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at Nathan with an expression caught somewhere between disbelief and professional caution. Is this real? As real as that coffee cup in your hand. Ray whistled low. How much are we talking about? Based on my research, somewhere in the neighborhood of 285 million. Ray set down his coffee cup very carefully. Nathan, that's not a neighborhood. That's a small country. I know. And this was just hidden. In an estate you bought for, what did you say, $1,200? $1,200 and every ounce of luck I've ever had. Ray leaned back, processing. Okay, first things first. Legally, whatever was in that property at the time of sale belongs to you. The auction was legitimate? Completely. Tax sale, Thompson County, I have all the paperwork. And there are no living heirs to the original owner? Not that I've been able to find. Theodore Ashford died in 1921. His entire family was killed by the Spanish flu 3 years earlier. No siblings, no cousins who survived. The estate's been in county hands for decades. Ray nodded slowly. Then, barring any surprises, that fortune is legally yours. But there are going to be complications, tax implications, provenance verification. The artwork alone is going to require authentication. That's why I need you, Nathan said. I can swing a hammer, I can rebuild a transmission, but this is way over my head. What do you want to do with it? Sell everything? Invest? Nathan told him about Theodore's letter, about the wish that whoever found the vault would use it to help others, about his idea for a foundation. Ray listened without interrupting. When Nathan finished, the lawyer was quiet for a long moment. You could keep all of it, you know. No one would blame you. You're a single father with 2 kids and nothing in the bank. Most people in your situation would take the money and run. I know, Nathan said. But that's not what Theodore wanted, and honestly, it's not what Grace would have wanted either. Grace? My wife. She passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Nathan's voice caught. She always talked about wanting to help people, families going through hard times. She used to volunteer at the hospital even when she was sick herself, said she knew what they were feeling and wanted to make it a little easier. Ray's expression softened. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Not many people do. Nathan straightened in his seat. But this is my chance, Ray. My chance to do something that matters. Not just for my family, but for other families like us. I'm not going to waste it. Ray was silent for another long moment. Then he extended his hand across the table. Then let's get to work. Over the next 3 weeks, a small team began to take shape. Ray brought in 2 associates from his firm who specialized in non-profit law and estate management. Nathan hired a private appraisal company with experience in rare assets. 3 serious people in sensible shoes who toured the vault with flashlights and clipboards and very carefully controlled expressions of shock. The initial assessment came back staggering. The gold alone was worth over $40 million at current market prices. The coin collection contained rarities that auction houses would fight over: one 1883 Morgan silver dollar in pristine condition that could fetch $200,000 on its own. The jewelry included pieces with documented provenance, several that had belonged to European royalty before finding their way to Eleanor Ashford's collection. But it was the artwork that truly stunned the experts. The suspected Monet was indeed authentic, a water lily study worth somewhere between $15 and $20 million. There was also a small Renoir, 2 sketches by Degas, and a landscape by Thomas Cole that the appraiser called museum quality without hesitation. The bearer bonds, though old, had matured dramatically. Several companies had merged or been acquired over the decades, their stock values multiplying beyond anything Theodore could have imagined. Final estimated value, $287 million. Nathan sat in his apartment staring at the number, unable to make it feel real. He'd spent his entire adult life measuring success in completed jobs and paid bills. Now he was looking at a sum that could fund small nations. Lily found him there, staring at the paperwork, and climbed into his lap like she hadn't done since she was 5 years old. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm okay, sweetheart." He wrapped his arms around her, just trying to understand. Understand what? How to do this right. How to honor Theodore's wish without messing everything up. How to help people without losing sight of what matters. Lily rested her head against his chest. "You know what I think?" "What's that?" "I think Mom is watching, and I think she's proud of you for even asking those questions." Nathan held his daughter tighter and let the tears come. The first foundation meeting took place in Evergreen Manor's restored library. Nathan had spent part of the initial funds on emergency repairs, making the estate safe and functional, if not yet beautiful. The fireplace worked. The electricity hummed. The roof no longer leaked. Ray had assembled a small board of directors, people with experience in charitable work and financial management. There was Margaret Chen, a retired hospital administrator. David Wells, who'd run a community development organization for 30 years. And Carol Santos, a former social worker who now consulted for non-profits. Nathan stood before them feeling entirely out of his depth. These were educated professionals. He was a handyman who'd gotten incredibly lucky. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know this situation is unusual." "Unusual is an understatement," Margaret said with a warm smile. "But unusual isn't bad. Tell us what you're thinking." Nathan took a deep breath. "My wife died 2 years ago. Cancer. It nearly destroyed us, not just emotionally but financially. The medical bills, the lost wages, the funeral costs. I almost lost my home. I almost lost my mind. The only thing that kept me going was my kids." He paused, collecting himself. What I learned from that experience is that families in crisis don't just need sympathy, they need practical help. Bills paid, mortgages covered, children cared for, the kind of support that lets you grieve without worrying about whether you'll have a roof over your head next month. David nodded. Go on. Theodore Ashford lost his family over 100 years ago. He spent the rest of his life grieving alone, and his final wish was that whoever found his fortune would use it to help others avoid that fate. Nathan gestured to the room around them. This estate, this money, it's not really mine. I'm just the caretaker. My job is to make sure it does what Theodore intended. Carol leaned forward. What specifically do you have in mind? I want to create a foundation focused on families facing medical crises, covering hospital bills, providing housing assistance, funding education for children who've lost parents, creating support networks so no one has to go through what we went through alone. He pulled out a folder and passed copies around the table. I've drafted some initial ideas with Ray's help. A crisis response fund for immediate needs, a housing program for families at risk of losing their homes due to medical debt, scholarships for children who've lost parents to illness, partnerships with hospitals to identify families in need before they fall through the cracks. Margaret reviewed the documents with growing interest. This is comprehensive. It's a starting point, Nathan said. I don't pretend to have all the answers. That's why I need people like you, people who know how to turn good intentions into real results. The meeting lasted 3 hours. They debated structures, discussed priorities, raised concerns Nathan hadn't considered. By the end, the bones of a plan had emerged. The Ashford Grace Foundation, named for the man who'd hidden the fortune and the woman who'd inspired its purpose. One more thing, Nathan said as they prepared to leave. I want this estate to be more than just a headquarters. Theodore built it for Christmas gatherings, for community, for joy. I want to restore that. Free events for the families we serve, a place where people can come together and remember that life isn't just about surviving, it's about celebrating the time we have. Carol Santos smiled, her eyes glistening. Mr. Mercer, I've worked in social services for 35 years. I've seen a lot of money come and go, most of it with strings attached. But this, she gestured around the room, this feels different. It is different, Nathan said. At least I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it is. As the board members filed out into the winter evening, Lily and Marcus emerged from upstairs where they'd been exploring the restored bedrooms. Marcus carried the red fire truck from the vault. Lily held a small framed photograph of Theodore's family that Nathan had found and cleaned. How did it go? Lily asked. Nathan looked around the library, at the shelves filled with old books, at the fireplace crackling with new warmth, at the windows looking out on snow-covered grounds. I think, he said slowly, it went exactly the way it was supposed to. Marcus tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad! Can we live here, in this house? Nathan knelt down to his son's level. It was the most Marcus had spoken in weeks, maybe months. His eyes were bright with something that looked almost like hope. Would you like that, buddy? Marcus nodded. It feels like Mom should be here, like she'd like it. Nathan's heart swelled until it ached. Then yes, we'll make this our home, all of us. Lily let out a small cry of joy and threw her arms around her father. Marcus joined the embrace, the three of them holding tight in the middle of an old library, surrounded by the ghosts of a family lost a century ago and the promise of a new one just beginning. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in sleeping bags by the library fire, Nathan walked through the darkened halls of Evergreen Manor. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, painting silver rectangles on walls that had stood for over 100 years. He climbed the stairs to Theodore's old study and stood before the desk where the journals still rested. He picked up the final one, the one addressed to whoever found the vault, and read the closing lines one more time. Find meaning in loss. Find purpose in pain. Find love even when love seems impossible. Nathan set down the journal and pulled out a pen and paper. He sat at Theodore's desk in Theodore's chair and began to write. To Theodore, I found your vault. I found your story. And I want you to know that your wait is over. My name is Nathan Mercer. I'm a widowed father with 2 children and a heart full of grief that I'm only now learning to transform into something useful. I don't know if you can hear me wherever you are, but if you can, I want you to know that your fortune is going to do exactly what you hoped. It's going to help families. It's going to ease suffering. It's going to prove that even in the darkest moments, hope is possible. My wife Grace died 2 years ago. I thought my life was over. Then I found this place, and I found you, and I found a reason to keep going. Your family is gone, but their memory will live on in every person we help. That's my promise to you. That's the gift I can give in return for the gift you gave me. With gratitude and determination, Nathan Mercer. December 2023. He folded the letter and placed it in the journal right next to Theodore's final entry. 2 men separated by a century, connected by loss, united by hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall on Evergreen Manor, covering the grounds in white, burying the past, making everything new. And somewhere deep beneath the house, in a vault that had waited over 100 years for this moment, the fortune of Theodore Ashford finally had a purpose. The true gift of Christmas wasn't the gold or the jewels or the artwork. It was the chance to transform tragedy into triumph. It was the opportunity to honor those we've lost by helping those who remain. It was the reminder that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. Nathan understood that now, and as he walked back downstairs to sleep beside his children, he carried that understanding like a flame in his chest, bright and warm and impossibly, wonderfully alive. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the foundation paperwork had been filed. Nathan had known it was coming. You couldn't move that kind of money without someone noticing. You couldn't hire appraisers and lawyers and board members without word spreading through the small-town networks that connected everyone to everyone else. But he hadn't expected it to happen like this. The Thompson County Gazette ran the story on their front page with a headline that made Nathan's stomach drop. Local handyman claims $200 million treasure hidden beneath abandoned estate. The article was filled with speculation, anonymous quotes from sources close to the situation, and a photograph of Evergreen Manor that made the estate look sinister rather than hopeful. By noon, the phone was ringing off the hook. Reporters from Harrisburg, Philadelphia, even New York. Television crews parked outside his apartment building. Neighbors who'd never spoken to him suddenly wanted to be his best friend. And then came the doubters. It started with whispers at the grocery store, sideways glances at the gas station. Then it escalated. Someone spray-painted fraud on the side of his pickup truck overnight. Anonymous letters appeared in his mailbox, accusing him of everything from theft to forgery to elaborate con artistry. How does a broke handyman suddenly discover a fortune? One letter demanded. What are you hiding? Nathan tried to ignore it. He kept his head down, focused on the work, trusted that the truth would eventually speak for itself, but the attacks kept coming. The hardest part was watching his children navigate the fallout. Lily came home from school one afternoon with red-rimmed eyes, refusing to talk about what had happened. It took Nathan an hour to coax the story out of her. A group of girls had cornered her in the hallway, calling her father a liar, a thief, a con man who would end up in prison where he belonged. Marcus withdrew even further into himself. The progress he'd made since discovering the vault, the spark of hope that had begun to return to his eyes, flickered and dimmed. He stopped playing with William's old fire truck. He stopped asking questions about the foundation. He just sat in his room, staring at the wall, waiting for the world to make sense again. Nathan held both his children that night. The three of them huddled together in the small apartment that suddenly felt like a fortress under siege. "Listen to me," he said, "both of you. People are scared of what they don't understand. They see something that doesn't fit their expectations, and instead of asking questions, they make up stories. That's not about us. That's about them." Lily wiped her eyes. "But what if they never stop? What if everyone always thinks we're liars?" "Then we prove them wrong," Nathan said. "Not with words, with actions. We do the work. We help the people we said we'd help, and eventually the truth becomes impossible to ignore." "What if it doesn't work?" Marcus whispered. Nathan pulled his son closer. "Then at least we tried. At least we did what we knew was right, and no matter what anyone says, no one can take that away from us." But the real challenge was still coming. 3 days after the Gazette article ran, Ray Baxter called with news that made Nathan's blood run cold. "We have a problem," Ray said. "A big one." Nathan gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of problem?" "Someone's filed a claim against the estate. They're asserting that they're a direct descendant of Theodore Ashford and that the vault contents should rightfully belong to them." Nathan's legs went weak. He sat down hard on the kitchen chair. "That's impossible. Theodore's whole family died. You said so yourself." "I said we couldn't find any documented heirs. That's not the same thing." Ray's voice was careful, measured. "This claimant says his grandmother was Theodore's illegitimate daughter, born before Theodore married Eleanor. He has documents, birth certificates, letters, photographs, that he claims prove the connection. Documents can be forged. They can, and we'll challenge them. But Nathan, you need to understand what we're up against. This man has hired serious lawyers. He's claiming not just the vault contents but the entire estate. If his claim holds up, you could lose everything." Nathan stared at the wall, his mind racing. "Who is he?" "His name is Victor Ashford. He's a real estate developer from Connecticut, worth quite a bit on his own, apparently. But 285 million is 285 million. Why would he wait until now? The estate's been sitting there for decades." "Because until now, it was worthless. A crumbling building with back taxes and structural problems. But the moment that treasure became public knowledge, suddenly the Ashford family tree got a lot more interesting." Nathan closed his eyes. Grace's face floated in the darkness behind his eyelids, her smile, her voice, the way she used to squeeze his hand when things got hard and say, "We'll figure it out, we always do." "What are our options?" he asked. "We fight. We hire our own genealogists. We challenge every document he produces. We prove that his claim is fraudulent or at least unprovable." Ray paused. "But I have to be honest with you. This is going to be expensive, and it's going to take time, possibly years." "Years?" "The legal system moves slowly, especially when this much money is involved. Victor Ashford has every incentive to drag this out. Tie everything up in litigation. Make your life miserable until you agree to settle." "Settle meaning give him part of the fortune. Or all of it, depending on how aggressive he gets." Nathan thought about Lily crying in her bedroom, about Marcus retreating into silence, about the families he'd promised to help, the foundation that was supposed to transform tragedy into hope. "No," he said. "No settlements, no surrender. If this man wants to claim what doesn't belong to him, he's going to have to prove it in court." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Nathan's voice hardened. "Theodore Ashford didn't hide that fortune for 100 years just to have some opportunist swoop in and steal it, and I didn't find it to give up at the first sign of trouble. We fight." "Then we fight," Ray agreed. "I'll start assembling the team." The next 6 months were the hardest of Nathan's life since Grace's death. The legal battle consumed everything. Depositions, hearings, mountains of paperwork that seemed to multiply overnight. Victor Ashford's lawyers were relentless, challenging every aspect of Nathan's ownership, demanding access to the vault, filing motion after motion designed to exhaust and intimidate. Nathan burned through a significant portion of the foundation's initial funds just keeping the case alive. There were moments when he wondered if it was worth it, if he should just walk away and let Victor have what he wanted. But every time that thought crept in, he remembered Theodore's letter, remembered the wish of a grieving man who'd lost everything and wanted his fortune to mean something. He couldn't betray that, not for convenience, not for peace, not for anything. The turning point came in March, 7 months after the claim was filed. Ray called with excitement barely contained in his voice. "We found something." "Good something or bad something?" "Very good something. Our genealogist traced Victor's alleged grandmother through every available record: birth certificates, census data, church documents, immigration papers. And Nathan, she doesn't exist." Nathan's heart stuttered. "What do you mean she doesn't exist?" "I mean Victor Ashford's claim is based on a woman who, according to every historical record we can find, was never born. The birth certificate he produced, forged. The letters supposedly written by Theodore acknowledging her, analyzed by 3 separate experts. All fraudulent." Nathan sank into his chair, relief flooding through him like warm water. He made it up. "The whole thing. Our theory is he discovered Theodore's story years ago while researching property opportunities. When the treasure became public knowledge, he saw a chance to cash in, created a fictional family connection, and hoped no one would look too closely. But we did. We did. And now we have evidence of deliberate fraud. Nathan, this doesn't just defeat his claim. It potentially exposes him to criminal charges." The court hearing took place in April, cherry blossoms blooming outside the courthouse windows as Victor Ashford's case collapsed. The judge reviewed the evidence of forgery, listened to expert testimony, and delivered a ruling so decisive that Victor's lawyers didn't even attempt an appeal. Claim dismissed with prejudice. Evergreen Manor and all its contents legally and permanently belonged to Nathan Mercer. As Nathan walked out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward his face. For a moment, he felt overwhelmed, dizzy with relief and exhaustion. Then he saw Lily and Marcus waiting on the courthouse steps, Ray standing protectively beside them. Lily was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Marcus held a small sign he'd made himself, crayon letters spelling out, "We won, Dad." Nathan pushed through the crowd and swept both children into his arms. He didn't care about the cameras, didn't care about the questions being shouted from every direction. All that mattered was this moment, this victory, this proof that doing the right thing could still triumph over greed and deception. "Mr. Mercer," a reporter called out, "what are your plans now that the legal battle is over?" Nathan turned to face the crowd, his children still pressed against his sides. "My plans haven't changed," he said. "The Ashford Grace Foundation exists to help families facing medical crises. That's what we're going to do. That's what Theodore Ashford wanted when he sealed that vault over 100 years ago, and that's the promise I intend to keep." "Do you have any comment on Victor Ashford's apparent fraud?" Nathan shook his head. "I feel sorry for him. He had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But instead of using what he had to help others, he tried to steal what wasn't his. That's a choice he'll have to live with." He turned and walked down the courthouse steps, his children on either side, leaving the cameras and questions behind. With the legal battle won, the real work could finally begin. Nathan threw himself into the foundation with everything he had. The first project was the one closest to his heart, partnering with Memorial General Hospital, the same hospital where Grace had spent her final months, to identify families drowning in medical debt. The first family they helped was the Rodriguezes. Maria and Carlos had 3 children under 10. Carlos had been diagnosed with leukemia 2 years earlier. The treatment had wiped out their savings, maxed out their credit cards, and left them facing foreclosure on their modest home. Nathan visited them personally, sitting in their small living room while their children played in the next room. Maria cried when he explained what the foundation could do. Carlos, thin and pale from chemotherapy, gripped Nathan's hand with surprising strength. "Why us?" Carlos asked. "There must be hundreds of families in the same situation." "There are," Nathan admitted, "and we're going to help as many as we can. But we have to start somewhere, and your family reminded me of mine." He told them about Grace, about the long nights in hospital rooms, the bills that piled up faster than he could count them, the terror of watching someone you love slip away while also worrying about losing everything else. By the end, all three adults were crying. The foundation paid off the Rodriguez's medical debt, $347,000. They covered the mortgage arrears, set up an education fund for the children, and connected the family with support services that would help them rebuild. It was a drop in the bucket compared to the fortune in the vault. But for the Rodriguezes, it was everything. Word spread. Within weeks, applications were flooding in. Families from across Pennsylvania, then neighboring states, then across the country. Each one represented someone in crisis, someone teetering on the edge of disaster, someone who had lost hope. Nathan couldn't help them all. No foundation could. But with each family they assisted, each debt they erased, each life they stabilized, the mission became clearer. This wasn't about saving everyone. It was about proving that help was possible, that no one had to face catastrophe alone. The foundation hired caseworkers, financial counselors, mental health professionals. They established partnerships with hospitals, schools, and community organizations. They created emergency response protocols for families facing imminent foreclosure or utility shutoffs. And at the center of it all stood Evergreen Manor, no longer a crumbling relic, but a beacon of hope. Nathan had the estate fully restored, not to its original gilded glory, but to something warmer, more welcoming. The ballroom became a community gathering space. The library opened to local students and researchers. The grounds were landscaped with gardens where families could walk and children could play. And the vault, that underground chamber that had hidden Theodore's fortune for over a century, was preserved as a historical exhibit. Visitors could descend the stone stairs, walk among empty display cases where the gold once sat, and read Theodore's story in his own words. One wall held photographs of every family the foundation had helped, a growing mosaic of faces representing lives changed. Another wall displayed letters of gratitude, hundreds of them, handwritten notes from people who had been pulled back from the brink. Lily became a regular presence at the manor, leading tours for school groups, explaining Theodore's history with the enthusiasm of someone who had lived it. At 12 years old, she had found her voice, transformed from a girl carrying burdens too heavy for her age into a young advocate for others facing similar struggles. Marcus changed too, slowly, painfully, but unmistakably. He started talking again, first in short sentences, then in longer conversations. He made friends at his new school. He laughed at dinner. He asked questions about the foundation and offered suggestions with the earnest sincerity only a 9-year-old could manage. "Dad," he asked one evening as they walked the manor grounds, "do you think Mom can see what we're doing?" Nathan looked up at the sky where stars were just beginning to appear. "I think so, buddy. I think she's watching everything." "Is she proud?" Nathan put his arm around his son's shoulders. "I think she's the proudest she's ever been." Not everyone celebrated the foundation's success. The same people who had called Nathan a fraud now called him a showboat, a publicity hound, someone using charity as a cover for ego. Local politicians who had ignored him during the legal battle now wanted photo opportunities and campaign endorsements. Distant relatives Nathan had never met suddenly appeared with hands extended. One afternoon, a man showed up at the manor gates claiming to be Nathan's second cousin. He'd traced their family tree, he said, found a connection Nathan had never known about. Surely Nathan would want to share his good fortune with family. Nathan listened politely, then declined. "The foundation helps families in crisis," he explained, "not relatives looking for handouts." The man's friendly demeanor evaporated. "You think you're better than everyone else now, just because you got lucky?" "I don't think I'm better than anyone," Nathan said quietly, "but I know what this money is for, and it's not for making people rich, it's for keeping people alive." The man left angry, hurling insults over his shoulder. Nathan watched him go with a heavy heart. He was learning that money, even money dedicated to good causes, changed how people saw you. Some were inspired, others were resentful. Most fell somewhere in between, unsure what to make of a handyman who had stumbled into fortune and chose to give it away. But the families he helped, they understood. There was the single mother from Ohio whose son needed a bone marrow transplant, the elderly couple from Maine facing bankruptcy after the husband's stroke, the young father from Texas who had lost his wife to cancer and couldn't afford both grief counseling for his children and food on the table. Each story echoed Nathan's own. Each family represented a version of what his life might have become if not for Theodore's hidden vault. Helping them wasn't charity in the traditional sense. It was recognition, acknowledgement, a way of saying, "I see you, I know what you're going through, and you don't have to face it alone." The first Christmas at Evergreen Manor arrived with a snowfall that blanketed the estate in white. Nathan had planned a celebration, a free holiday event for every family the foundation had assisted that year. Invitations went out to 327 households, nearly all of them accepted. The ballroom was transformed. A massive Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments made by local children. Tables groaned with food prepared by volunteer chefs. A band played carols while people danced and laughed and cried tears of joy. Nathan stood near the fireplace, watching it all unfold, when a small hand tugged at his sleeve. He looked down to find a girl about Marcus's age, her dark hair pulled back in braids, her eyes huge and solemn. "Are you Mr. Nathan?" she asked. "I am. My mommy said I should thank you. She said you saved our house." Nathan knelt to her level. "What's your name?" "Sophia." "Well, Sophia, you don't need to thank me. Helping your family was my honor." The girl studied him for a moment, then threw her arms around his neck. The hug lasted only seconds, but Nathan felt it in his chest long after she had run back to her mother. Later that evening, as the party wound down and families began to leave, Nathan found himself alone in the library. The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow continued to fall. He walked to the window and looked out at the grounds, at the families loading into cars, at children clutching new toys and waving goodbye. A year ago, this place had been a ruin. Now it was alive with purpose. Lily appeared beside him. "Pretty good party, huh?" Nathan smiled. "Pretty good." "The Rodriguezes were here. Carlos is in remission. Maria said to tell you thank you." "They don't need to thank me." "They want to." Lily leaned against her father's arm. "Dad, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't bought this place?" Nathan considered the question. "Sometimes. But then I remember that I did buy it, that I found the vault, that I chose to use it the way Theodore hoped someone would." He shook his head. "We can't control what happens to us. We can only control what we do with it." Marcus wandered in, holding a cookie in one hand and a cup of hot chocolate in the other. "Dad, the Rodriguez's kids want to know if we can play video games in the game room." Nathan laughed. "Go ahead, just don't stay up too late." Marcus grinned and ran off. Lily followed, pausing at the doorway to look back. "I'm glad we found this place," she said. "I think Mom would be happy here." "I think so too, sweetheart." After she left, Nathan remained at the window. The last cars were pulling away, taillights glowing red against the white snow. The manor stood quiet now, peaceful, waiting. He thought about Theodore Ashford, alone in this house over a century ago, sealing away his fortune with nothing but hope that someday it would find the right hands. He thought about Grace, her dream of a house with pink roses and room for joy. He thought about his children, transformed from grieving shadows into young people with purpose and passion. And he thought about the families they had helped, the debts erased, the homes saved, the children who would grow up with opportunities they might never have had. $285 million. It was a number so large it still didn't feel real. But what it represented, hope, healing, second chances, that was as real as the snow falling outside. Nathan placed his hand against the cold window glass and made a silent promise. To Theodore, whose fortune had waited 100 years for this moment. To Grace, whose spirit guided every decision he made. To his children, who deserved a future filled with more than grief. And to every family still struggling in the darkness, not yet knowing that help was on the way. "We're just getting started," he whispered to the night. And somewhere in the vast, snow-covered silence, he could have sworn he heard the manor itself breathe in response, alive at last, ready for whatever came next. The years that followed moved like seasons, each one building on the last, each one bringing new growth to Evergreen Manor and the lives it touched. Nathan Mercer, once a struggling handyman who couldn't afford Christmas presents for his children, had become something he never expected. A guardian of hope, a keeper of promises, a man who proved that fortune meant nothing without purpose. The foundation expanded beyond anything he had imagined during those first uncertain months. What started as a single family helped became dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The Ashford Grace Foundation opened satellite offices in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. They partnered with hospitals across the Northeast, creating early intervention programs that identified families in crisis before they lost everything. But Evergreen Manor remained the heart of it all. Nathan had poured years of work into the estate, not to restore its gilded past, but to create something new. The ballroom that once hosted Theodore Ashford's legendary Christmas parties now served as a community gathering space, its polished floors witnessing wedding receptions for families who couldn't afford venues, memorial services for those who had lost loved ones, and celebrations for children who had beaten illness against all odds. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and leather-bound volumes, opened to local students every afternoon. Tutoring programs operated from the long oak tables. College counselors met with first-generation applicants in the reading nooks. The knowledge that had gathered dust for a century finally served its purpose. The grounds transformed too. Where overgrown gardens had choked the landscape, volunteers planted community vegetable beds, rose gardens in memory of Eleanor and her daughter Rose, and a children's playground built around a massive oak tree on the eastern hill. That tree stood above 3 weathered headstones, markers for Theodore's family that Nathan had discovered and restored with trembling hands. The vault itself became a museum, a pilgrimage site for those who wanted to understand how one man's grief had transformed into another man's salvation. Visitors descended the stone stairs, walked through the now empty chamber, and read Theodore's story on illuminated panels along the walls. Where gold bars once sat, photographs now hung. Every family the foundation had helped, a growing tapestry of faces representing lives changed. One wall held Theodore's original letter, carefully preserved behind glass, its faded ink still legible after more than a century. May whoever follows it use what they find not for themselves but for others. That is the only redemption left to me. Beside it, Nathan had placed his own response, the letter he had written that first night after discovering the vault's true purpose. Your wait is over. Your family's memory will live on in every person we help. Visitors often cried when they read both letters together. Nathan understood. He still cried sometimes too. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, fundamental. Evergreen Manor had stopped being a building and become a living thing, breathing with the hopes and dreams of everyone who passed through its doors. And at the center of it all, The Mercer family had transformed too. Lily turned 16 the autumn after the Foundation's 5th anniversary. She had grown into a young woman of remarkable poise and passion, her mother's eyes paired with her father's determination. She had stopped being the little girl who made breakfast because her father couldn't function without her. Now she chose to help, not from necessity, but from purpose. She had become the Foundation's youngest board member, appointed on her 15th birthday over the objections of those who thought she was too young. Nathan had overruled them all. "She's lived this," he told the board. "She's seen what families go through when they lose someone. She understands this mission in a way that none of us fully can. If we're serious about serving young people in crisis, we need young people at the table." Lily proved him right within months. She designed a peer support program connecting teenagers who had lost parents with others who understood their grief. The program launched in 12 high schools across Pennsylvania and expanded to 3 other states within a year. "When Mum died," Lily explained during a presentation to potential donors, "I felt completely alone. My friends didn't know what to say. My teachers treated me like I was fragile, but what I needed wasn't people walking on eggshells around me. I needed someone who got it, someone who had been through the same thing and survived." She paused, her voice steady, but her eyes glistening. "This program creates those connections. It tells grieving kids that they are not alone, that survival is possible, that life after loss can still have meaning." She smiled, that brave smile Nathan knew so well. "My mom taught me that, and now I get to teach others." The donors wrote checks that night, totaling over $2 million. Lily accepted their gratitude with grace and immediately began planning how to expand the program further. Marcus had changed too, in ways both quieter and more profound. The silent boy who had retreated into himself after his mother's death had emerged slowly, painfully, like a flower pushing through concrete. He was 13 now, lanky and awkward, still prone to long silences, but those silences no longer felt like walls. They felt like thoughtfulness, like a mind processing the world before speaking about it. He had discovered a passion for history, spending hours in the Manor's library reading about Theodore Ashford's era, about the railroad expansion that had built the family fortune, about the devastating influenza pandemic that had destroyed it. He created a detailed timeline of the Ashford family, complete with photographs and documents that now served as the central exhibit in the Vault Museum. "People think history is boring," Marcus told a group of visiting students during one of his tours, "but it's really just stories about people who faced impossible things and had to figure out what to do. Theodore Ashford was just a guy who loved his family. When he lost them, he had to decide what to do with his pain." He gestured around the vault. "He could have spent everything on himself, thrown parties, bought mansions, traveled the world. Instead, he hid it away and hoped someday someone would use it better than he could. That's not boring, that's heroic." One student raised her hand. "But he died alone. Isn't that sad?" Marcus considered the question. "Yeah, it's sad. But he also left behind something that helped thousands of people, my family included. So maybe dying alone isn't the worst thing. Maybe the worst thing is dying without leaving anything meaningful behind." Nathan watched his son from the doorway, tears streaming silently down his face. Grace would have been so proud, so impossibly, overwhelmingly proud. The 5th Christmas at Evergreen Manor arrived with a celebration unlike any before. Nathan had planned something special, a reunion of every family the Foundation had helped over the past 5 years. Invitations went out to nearly 4,000 households across 17 states. Travel assistance was offered. Accommodations were arranged in local hotels and volunteer homes. The planning took 6 months and involved dozens of staff members and hundreds of volunteers. The response exceeded all expectations. On Christmas Eve, over 3,000 people descended on Evergreen Manor. They came in cars and buses and trains, families reunited, Children who had been sick now healthy and running across the snow-covered grounds, parents who had faced foreclosure now stable and employed, elderly couples who had lost everything and rebuilt from the foundation's support. The main hall was transformed into a winter wonderland. Thousands of lights twinkled from every surface. A massive tree, 27 feet tall, dominated the ballroom, decorated with ornaments submitted by families from across the country. Each ornament told a story, a date of diagnosis, a moment of crisis, a turning point when help arrived. Nathan moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting hugs, listening to stories he had heard in fragments during case reviews, but now experienced in full. There was Carlos Rodriguez, 5 years cancer-free, his children now teenagers who talked about college. There was Maria Santos, the single mother whose son had needed a bone marrow transplant, now watching that son play basketball with other kids in the gymnasium. There was James Walker, the widower from Texas who had been drowning in grief and debt, now remarried and coaching Little League in his community. Each face represented a moment when the foundation had stepped in. Each story represented a life that might have been lost to despair. Nathan felt the weight of it all, not as burden, but as blessing. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued around him, Nathan slipped away to the library. He needed a moment alone, a chance to breathe, to process the enormity of what had unfolded. He stood at the window, watching the lights from the party reflect off the snow, when a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Hiding from your own party?" He turned. Margaret Chen, the retired hospital administrator who had served on the foundation's board since the beginning, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of hot chocolate. Nathan smiled. Just needed a minute. She handed him a cup and joined him at the window. "It's overwhelming, isn't it? Seeing all of them together?" "Overwhelming is one word." He took a sip, the warmth spreading through his chest. "I keep thinking about that first day, standing in the vault, surrounded by all that gold, completely terrified." "Terrified of what?" "Of messing it up, of not being worthy, of taking this incredible gift and wasting it on something that didn't matter." He shook his head. "I was a handyman, Margaret. I fixed leaky faucets and squeaky doors. I didn't know the first thing about running a foundation or managing millions of dollars or helping people in crisis." Margaret smiled. "And yet here we are. 5 years later, 4,000 families helped, over $300 million in assistance provided." Nathan blinked. $300 million? That's more than the vault contained. "Donations," Margaret explained. "Investments, compound interest. The fortune Theodore left has multiplied because you put it to work instead of letting it sit." She patted his arm. "You didn't just preserve his legacy, Nathan, you grew it." They stood in comfortable silence for a long moment, watching the snow fall. "Do you ever wonder what he would think?" Nathan asked. "Theodore, I mean, if he could see all this." Margaret considered the question. "I think he would weep. I think he would fall to his knees and weep with gratitude that his faith wasn't misplaced, that his fortune found exactly the right person." "I'm not special," Nathan said quietly. "I just got lucky." "Luck put the key in your hand. Choice made you turn it." She turned to face him directly. "Nathan, there are thousands of people in that ballroom tonight who would be homeless, bankrupt, or dead if not for decisions you made. That's not luck, that's courage." Before he could respond, the library door burst open. Lily and Marcus tumbled in, breathless and grinning. "Dad, you have to come see this!" Lily grabbed his hand. "The Rodriguez kids organized a thank you video. Everyone contributed. It's like 2 hours long." Marcus bounced on his heels. "They interviewed families from all over the country. Some people cried. I cried. It's really good." Nathan looked at Margaret, who waved him away with a smile. "Go. I'll be fine here with my hot chocolate and my memories." He let his children pull him back into the ballroom, back into the light and noise and overwhelming love of 3,000 people who had gathered to celebrate hope. The video played on a massive screen, face after face, sharing stories of darkest moments transformed into bright futures. Nathan watched with tears streaming down his face, his children pressed against his sides, surrounded by the living proof that Theodore Ashford's century-old wish had finally come true. The new year brought new challenges and new opportunities. The Foundation launched its most ambitious project yet, a national expansion that would establish regional offices in 12 cities across the country. The goal was to help 10,000 families annually within 5 years, a number that had seemed impossible when Nathan first descended those stone stairs, but now felt achievable, even inevitable. The expansion required new staff, new systems, new partnerships. Nathan found himself traveling constantly, meeting with hospital administrators in Chicago, community organizers in Los Angeles, state legislators in Austin and Denver and Atlanta. He spoke at conferences, appeared on morning news programs, testified before congressional committees about the healthcare debt crisis crushing American families. Through it all, he carried Theodore's letter like a talisman, reading it during quiet moments on airplanes and in hotel rooms, reminding himself why he was doing this, who he was serving, what promise he had made. Lily graduated high school that spring, valedictorian of her class, with acceptance letters from 7 universities. She chose to attend Penn State, close enough to return to Evergreen Manor on weekends, far enough to build her own life. Her graduation speech, delivered to a packed auditorium of families who had known her since she was the grieving 11-year-old making breakfast for her broken father, brought the entire crowd to tears. 5 years ago, she said, I thought my life was over. My mom had died. My family was falling apart. I couldn't see any future worth living for. She paused, composing herself. But then my dad did something crazy. He bought a crumbling old mansion with money we couldn't afford to spend. And hidden beneath that mansion, we found something that changed everything. Not just money, though yes, there was a lot of money, but purpose, direction, a reason to keep going. She looked out at the audience, finding her father's face in the crowd. Theodore Ashford lost his family over 100 years ago. He spent the rest of his life alone, grieving, waiting for someone who would understand his pain and transform it into something meaningful. My dad was that someone. But really, all of us are that someone. Everyone who has ever lost something precious and found a way to keep living. Everyone who has turned their worst moment into motivation to help others. Her voice strengthened. I'm going to college in the fall to study social work. I'm going to spend my life helping families in crisis, not because it's expected of me, but because I know what that crisis feels like. I know how dark it gets, and I know that sometimes all you need is one person, one moment, one chance to believe that things can get better. She smiled, tears glistening on her cheeks. Thank you, Mum, for showing me what love looks like. Thank you, Dad, for showing me what purpose looks like. And thank you, Theodore, wherever you are, for waiting 100 years for us to find you. The applause lasted 3 full minutes. Nathan stood in the back of the auditorium, openly weeping, prouder than he had ever been of anything in his entire life. Marcus entered high school that fall, no longer the silent boy who had worried his father so deeply. He had grown into a thoughtful, articulate young man with a passion for storytelling and a gift for making complex history accessible. His blog about Theodore Ashford and the Evergreen Manor story had attracted over 50,000 followers. College professors cited his research. Documentary filmmakers requested interviews. I want to be a historian, he told Nathan one evening as they walked the manor grounds. Or maybe a filmmaker, someone who tells stories that help people understand the past. That sounds perfect, buddy. It's because of you, you know. Marcus kicked at a stone in the path. You taught me that stories matter, that one person's decision can echo for 100 years. Theodore decided to hide that fortune. You decided to use it for good. I want to tell those stories so other people can learn from them." Nathan put his arm around his son's shoulders. "Your mom would be so proud of you." "I know." Marcus smiled, a real smile without shadows. "I can feel her sometimes. When I'm writing or giving tours or just sitting in the library, it's like she's right there watching." "She is," Nathan said. "She definitely is." The 10th anniversary celebration was the largest yet. Over 10,000 people gathered at Evergreen Manor, spilling across the grounds, filling every room, camping in the adjacent fields with the Foundation's permission. Families had traveled from every state, some from other countries. Former recipients who had rebuilt their lives returned with their own children, eager to show them where their second chance had begun. Nathan, now 48 years old, stood on the front steps of the manor and looked out at the sea of faces. His hair had gone mostly grey. His hands were still calloused from work. He had never stopped helping with restoration projects, never stopped swinging hammers and turning wrenches, but his eyes held something they hadn't held a decade earlier: peace. Lily stood beside him, 21 now, finishing her master's degree in social work, already recruited by 3 major organizations and planning to start her own non-profit focused on youth grief counseling. Marcus flanked his other side, 17, preparing college applications, his documentary about Evergreen Manor recently accepted to a regional film festival. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nathan began, his voice carrying across the crowd through strategically placed speakers. 10 years ago, I was a widowed father who couldn't afford Christmas presents for my kids. I had $47 in my bank account, a mountain of debt, and no hope for the future. He paused, letting the words sink in. Then I bought a crumbling old mansion for $1,200 and everything changed. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But this story isn't really about me. It's about a man named Theodore Ashford, who lived in this house over 100 years ago. Theodore lost his entire family to the influenza pandemic of 1918. His wife Eleanor, his son William, his daughter Rose, all of them gone within a week. The crowd grew silent. Theodore could have done anything with his grief. He could have destroyed himself with drinking or gambling. He could have retreated into bitterness and blamed the world for his loss. Instead, he made a choice. He sealed away his fortune and wrote a letter to whoever might find it someday. A letter that asked them to use what he left behind not for themselves but for others. Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "I found that letter. I read those words, and I made a promise to a man who had been dead for over a century. A promise that his fortune would mean something, that his family's memory would survive through the good we did in their name." He gestured to the crowd. "Look around you. Every person here represents that promise kept. Over the past 10 years, the Ashford Grace Foundation has helped more than 47,000 families. We've erased over $2 billion in medical debt. We've prevented more than 12,000 foreclosures. We've funded education for over 8,000 children who lost parents to illness." Applause began to build, but Nathan held up his hand. "But I want you to understand something. This wasn't me. This was us. Every volunteer who gave their time, every donor who gave their resources, every family who had the courage to ask for help and the strength to rebuild their lives. Theodore Ashford planted a seed over 100 years ago. But all of you, all of us, made it grow." The applause came then, unstoppable, a wave of sound that washed over the manor grounds and echoed off the hills. Nathan let it wash over him, then raised his hand once more. "There's one more thing I want to share with you today, something I've been working on for the past year." The crowd quieted, curious. 10 years ago, I found Theodore's letter in the vault beneath this house. It changed my life. It gave me purpose when I had none. And ever since I've wondered, what would I say to the person who finds this place 100 years from now? What message would I leave for the future? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This morning I placed my own letter in the vault next to Theodore's. A letter to whoever comes after me, after all of us. and with your permission, I'd like to read it to you now." The silence was absolute. Nathan unfolded the paper and began to read. "To you who find this place in years to come, my name is Nathan Mercer. I was a handyman, a widower, a father of 2. I found Theodore Ashford's hidden fortune in December of 2023, and I spent the rest of my life trying to honor his wish." He looked up briefly, then continued, "If you're reading this, then I am gone. Maybe my children are gone too. Maybe the foundation I built has changed or ended or transformed into something I couldn't have imagined. That's okay. Everything changes. Everything evolves. The important thing isn't that my specific vision survives, but that the principle behind it does." His voice steadied. "Theodore taught me that fortune means nothing without purpose, that money is just metal and paper unless it serves something greater than itself, that the only way to honor those we've lost is to help those who remain. My wife Grace died of cancer before I found this place. She never saw the vault, never knew the fortune existed, never witnessed what her memory helped inspire, but I felt her presence every single day, in the families we helped, in the children we educated, in the hope we restored to people who had lost everything. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if the challenges you face are the same as the ones we faced, but I know this: as long as there are people in crisis, there will be a need for others to help them. As long as there is suffering, there will be an opportunity for compassion. As long as there is darkness, there will be a need for light. Be that light, whatever form it takes, whatever resources you have. Be the person who stops when others drive past. Be the hand that reaches out when others look away. Be the voice that says you are not alone when everyone else is silent. That is Theodore's legacy. That is my legacy. And now it is yours." With hope that echoes across centuries, Nathan Mercer, Christmas Day, 2033. He folded the letter and looked out at the crowd. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the bare winter trees and the distant cry of birds circling overhead. Then, slowly, a single person began to clap, then another, then 100, then 1,000. The applause built into something that felt less like sound and more like a physical force, a wave of gratitude and love that threatened to knock Nathan off his feet. Lily grabbed one hand. Marcus grabbed the other. Together, the Mercer family stood on the steps of Evergreen Manor and let the wave wash over them. That night, after the crowds had dispersed and the grounds had grown quiet, Nathan walked alone through the manor. His footsteps echoed in the empty ballroom. His reflection ghosted across darkened windows. The only light came from the Christmas tree, still glowing in the corner, its ornaments catching and scattering the soft glow. He descended the stone stairs to the vault one final time. The chamber felt different now, not empty despite the absence of gold and jewels, full of the photographs lining every wall, the faces of families transformed, full of the letters in their glass cases, his and Theodore's side by side, full of something he could only call presence, as if everyone who had ever been helped by this place had left a piece of themselves behind. Nathan walked to Theodore's desk and sat in the chair where he had sat so many times before. He ran his fingers across the worn wood, feeling the grooves where Theodore's pen had pressed too hard, the scratches where frustrated hands had gripped the edges. "We did it," he whispered to the empty room. "We really did it." Silence answered, but it was a warm silence, a comfortable silence, the silence of completion, of promises kept, of journeys ended. Nathan closed his eyes and let himself remember. Grace, laughing in their tiny apartment kitchen, flour on her nose from attempted Christmas cookies. Lily at 11, so serious and brave, holding everything together when her father couldn't. Marcus at 8, retreating into silence, and then slowly, painfully emerging back into the light. The first time he saw the vault, gold gleaming in his trembling flashlight beam. The first family they helped, Carlos and Maria Rodriguez weeping in their small living room, the thousands of families since, the billions of dollars, the countless lives redirected from despair toward hope. All of it starting with one choice, one decision to stop at a county auction and bid on something everyone else was afraid to touch. He opened his eyes and stood. The stone stairs were steeper than they used to be. His knees complained, his back ached, but he climbed them steadily, emerging through the grandfather clock into the foyer where it had all begun. Lily and Marcus were waiting for him. "We thought you might be down there," Lily said. "Just saying goodbye." Nathan smiled. "Or maybe thank you. I'm not sure which." Marcus moved to his father's side. "It's not really goodbye though, is it? This place, what it represents, that doesn't end just because we're older." "No," Nathan agreed. "It doesn't end. It just changes hands, passes to the next generation. Which reminds me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out two small objects. Keys, brass, worn smooth with age. "These are copies of the vault key," he explained. "I had them made years ago, but I was waiting for the right moment to give them to you." He pressed one into Lily's palm, one into Marcus's. "The foundation will continue. The staff will keep doing their work. But this place, Evergreen Manor, the vault, Theodore's legacy, that belongs to our family. And now it belongs to you." Lily stared at the key in her hand, tears forming in her eyes. "Dad, you don't have to do anything with it right now. Maybe not for years, but when the time comes, when you're ready, this is your inheritance. Not the money. There's plenty of that in trusts and investments. But the responsibility, the privilege, the promise." Marcus gripped his key tightly. "We won't let you down." "I know you won't." Nathan pulled both his children into an embrace, holding them the way he had held them on that first Christmas in this house, when everything was uncertain and terrifying and impossibly wonderful. "I love you both so much," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become." They stood together in the foyer of Evergreen Manor, three people bound by loss and transformed by purpose, surrounded by the echoes of a century of hope. Outside, snow began to fall once more, blanketing the estate in white, covering the past, making everything clean and new. And somewhere deep beneath their feet, in a vault that had waited over 100 years for this moment, two letters rested side by side, their messages reaching across time, their promises finally, completely, eternally fulfilled. The story of Theodore Ashford did not end with his death in 1921. The story of Nathan Mercer did not end with his discovery of the vault. The story of the Ashford Grace Foundation did not end with its 10,000th family helped or its 100th millionth dollar distributed. Because stories like this never really end. They transform, they evolve, they pass from generation to generation, like flames passed from candle to candle, each light a little different, each flame drawing from the same eternal source. Lily Mercer went on to found her own organization, one dedicated to children who had lost parents. She married a doctor she met during her graduate studies, had 3 children of her own, and raised them in a small house just down the road from Evergreen Manor. She visited the vault at least once a month, sitting in Theodore's chair, reading both letters, reminding herself why she did what she did. Marcus Mercer became a filmmaker, winning acclaim for documentaries about hidden histories and forgotten heroes. His film about Evergreen Manor premiered at Sundance and played in theaters across the country. He married his high school sweetheart, had 4 children, and spent every Christmas at the manor without exception. The foundation continued to grow, evolving with each decade, adapting to new challenges, serving new populations. Hurricanes, pandemics, economic crashes, each crisis brought new families in need, and each time the foundation was there. And Evergreen Manor stood through it all. Its walls witnessed generations of Mercers and Ashfords and strangers who became family. Its halls echoed with laughter and tears and speeches and songs. Its vault remained a pilgrimage site, a place where people came to remember that hope was always possible. That purpose could be found in the darkest moments, that one person's choice could echo across a century. Nathan Mercer lived to be 83 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep, in the master bedroom of Evergreen Manor, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. His final words, spoken to Lily just hours before the end, were simple: "Tell Theodore I kept my promise." His funeral was held in the Manor ballroom, attended by thousands who had been touched by his life. Representatives from families he had helped decades earlier stood beside government officials and community leaders. The service lasted 4 hours, filled with stories and tears and laughter and music. They buried him on the Eastern Hill, next to the oak tree where Theodore had buried his family over a century before. A new headstone joined the old ones. Nathan Mercer, 1985 to 2068. He found a fortune and shared it with the world, and beside it, smaller but equally significant, Grace Mercer, 1987 to 2021. She taught him what love looked like. The snow fell that day too, soft flakes drifting down like whispered blessings, covering the graves, covering the manor, covering the world in white. And somewhere, in whatever place comes after this one, a handyman and a railroad tycoon and a woman who loved them both stood together for the first time, watching what their choices had created, knowing that the story would continue long after all of them were gone. Because that is the nature of legacy. That is the power of purpose. That is the true gift of Christmas. Not gold or jewels or money, but the chance to transform tragedy into triumph. To honor those we've lost by helping those who remain. To prove that even in the darkest moments, hope is always, always possible. Anyone can change the world if they have the courage to believe that their choices matter. Anyone can build a legacy if they're willing to put others before themselves. Anyone can find purpose in pain if they refuse to let that pain define them. And anyone, no matter how broken, no matter how lost, no matter how hopeless they feel, can become exactly what the world needs if only they have the courage to try. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that the best gifts in life are the ones we give away.